Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, Welcome to this panel organised by Europa Distribution. My name is Michael Gubbins. You'll have to take my word for it, as you will with all of us, with our masks. This morning we're going to be talking about distribution. This panel is organised by Europa Distribution, but I think it's a good time to think about what we mean by distribution. And one of the things that I think will come out of this panel is when we reach this point of crisis, where we're starting to be concerned about the future of our art form, about the future of our businesses, it's a time when we should be reassessing where the value is, what the real work that happens within our industry is. And I think increasingly we're beginning to understand during this period just how vital the role of distribution is. And it's not for nothing that one of the discussions going on at the moment quite strongly in the industry is whether that word distribution is actually the appropriate one anymore. Maybe we should be thinking more in terms of publishing, or we should be, but at least recognizing that we're not talking about some dull function that's a link between producer and audience. It is where value is created. It's where demand is created. It's all of those things that matter. So that is the basis that I think we're going to be talking about today. But there's something more than that, I think, which is we have to accept that we are in an environment that is constantly changing. And I think it's essential that we understand what those new realities are without getting stuck in the cliches of new normals. I think it's essential that we understand how the realities of the markets in which we're operating, the realities of audience demand, the realities of the economics of the world that we're now in. And I think we have I know we have a great panel here there's a geographical spread, there's a spread in the kind of work that they're doing as well, but each one of them, I think, are addressing and having to adapt to these changes in their own ways. So we have Margherita Kitty of Teodora, which will be, I think, very familiar to people from this country. Ruvlink from, see, I got it right, it's taken me some time, from Cherry Pickers in Amsterdam. We have Oscar Eriksson, who's, we're getting the Swedish perspective here from Fukets Bio in Sweden. And finally, we have Ira von Ginants. There we go, from Prokino. Again, a very distinguished distribution organization. So let's start by trying to understand first just the environments. If we can just go around and just get a clear idea. If we can, as much as possible, make sure that we give concrete examples of what we're doing. But maybe we could start with you, Margherita. Tell us about the business and the environment in which you're now operating, and how that's changed, or indeed how it's continued from the challenges that you had before.
Well, actually, I can say that the virus situation has simply exasperated something that was already there concerning art house, cinema, distribution. So we are facing obviously a dramatically changed and difficult situation, but it was a situation that was already there in a way. It was our role as distributor of art house cinema was already changing a lot, and our role from distributor to publisher, as you rightly said, was already happening. The change, clearly this situation has been exasperating this, so everything is going faster. It's happening quite faster. So we are dealing now with different economical conditions that we have, that makes it happening now, soon, and not smoothly as it was supposed to be. So the situation we are dealing with, it's pretty much the same of before the virus in this sense. Clearly now we are facing the dramatic fact that everything is, the cash flow from the theatrical is dramatically being cut for 6 months due to the lockdown. And this is something very tough to cope. And now we are trying to deal with that, but clearly we have 50% of the theatrical audience that can allow theaters, so it's very much complicated. But we are keeping on doing what we were doing before. So we are working on curation on our films, and we still keep on bringing films in theaters. We never gave up our films to VOD so far. So we try to keep the chain alive, and so we are simply adapting to a process that was already in action, and it's now going faster. That's it.
I mean, I think the way that you've adapted, I'd really like, that's I think the second part of this discussion is the specifics. But you've got a situation where even where theatres are open, they're on limited numbers.
Approximately 40 to 50% seats available respect to the past.
And for the
and clearly less people going anyway.
And you know, clearly, I don't know what percentage you would say on average of your revenues were coming from theatrical in the first place. So how much of those do you think you've lost?
Usually, I would say that 50 to 60% of our revenues was coming from theatrical, and now I would say we're lucky enough to have a very good release in September, which was quite unexpected. But I would say that now I would stick to 20 to 30 now.
Okay,
so
and
it's a big change. Now the huge part is coming from TV. It was not like that in the past.
No, and I think it's quite important as we go on and we talk about adaptation to understand it's not just lost revenues from theatrical, it's also the loss of the theatrical push that gives you the revenues from VOD.
Totally, absolutely, yes. Luckily, TV, for the moment, the conversation we are having with TVs, they are adapting to this scenario and clearly understanding that for the moment.
And just public support at this stage, just because we're trying to understand that environment, you've had presumably government support at business level. I don't know how far it's gone in terms of financial support day to day for your...
Not for distribution, there's no big... there is public support has been quite strong for exhibitors. Strong, I mean, they lost so much that it's not that much, but it was in place, not for distributors so far. We are going to have some tax credit of distribution tax credit enhancement, but it has to be announced, and it's only for Italian films.
Okay, we'll come on to what we need as the conversation goes on. So, Hoob, just your experience.
Yes. Well, in our market, the general drop in the market is 50%, and my company theatrically also lost about 50%, 53% of turnover. And normally theatrical would be 70%, I think, of my income, my attribution to the income. And also now it's basically subsistence level. You know, I try to spend much less on P&A, and funny enough, I had 2 films that were quite successful, but I mean on a much different level than last year, but also because I spent less. So the general market is in a very bad state. It's so half what it should be. And in terms of, and I was quite lucky. I have very low fixed costs. I've always said I have a very recent company. I know it's a very risky business, and I've always been very aware of this. So that's also why I survive. We don't have any specific support in place. But of course, we have the media program, which upped. We didn't mention this yet, I think, but they increased the automatic. And luckily, I had a very good year last year, so I will profit from that in the coming year or even years. And yeah, so and nationally there has been support for local films. That was immediately put in place by the Film Fund. But the Film Fund, of course, is very much focused on their own production. And we don't do a lot of local products, so we didn't really profit from that. And on the national level, it's been very hard for us, I think, to get across as a collective. Also because we have a very touchy relationship between the exhibitors and distributors on a national level. It's always very hard to find one voice. There's of course the complication of the majors. There's a couple of really big players in the exhibition sector, so there's huge differences amongst each other, and then there is this kind of deep-rooted animosity which keeps playing up. So it gets quite complicated to really clearly speak to the government. And what you also see is, and I think this is the case in many countries, that the government is really acting very defensively at the moment. Because at first they were, particularly in Holland, I think, and in Sweden even more so, they were very confident, and they said, you know, we're going to be very science-based and very particular for everybody's needs and everything. But then the debate started getting louder and louder, and they are much more worried about publicity now than about actual.
Well, let's come back to that. I think one of the key outcomes I'm hoping of this panel as we go on towards the end will be what would work. What is that voice that they need to hear? VOD, has that played a part?
Yes, but it's minor. It's minor. It's something that's being said all the time, and there were a couple of initiatives that were they adapted very fast, and we had one film in theaters on the day of the lockdown. Basically, it was our premiere, and it looked very well, and we immediately went online with it. But the amount of money that we made online is nothing compared to what it was supposed to be, and even now, if I look at my statements for VOD, I think last month it was 1,500 euros. I mean, this is nothing compared to what we are supposed to receive theatrically. You know, we're doing like box office. Last year was 1.5 million for my company. So you see the comparison. That cannot ever, not in the near future, make up for the loss of theatrical.
Okay, very difficult environment then. Lots of profile for the things that are meant to be replacing it, but as yet we're not in a position where there is an ecosystem that neatly works. Can we move to you, Oscar, from Sweden?
Yeah, I mean, the Swedish situation is, we talked yesterday, and it's a little bit special, and it's not the same as for everyone else. I mean, Sweden never went into lockdown, even if we went down from a situation where we could have as many as we wanted in a cinema to where we have 50, which is one of the biggest situation where we are now. It doesn't matter if your cinema takes 600 or if it takes 50. 50 is the maximum you can be in any cinemas. So for us, the situation is that we can never sell enough tickets. I mean, we can never get enough revenue in on any film. So that's the situation where we are now. I would also say that, I mean, the Swedish situation is also, I mean, the VOD market is kind of exploding in Sweden in another way. Sweden has been very quick on jumping on every VOD platform there is. Netflix, Disney, everything has really gone really, really strongly, which doesn't really help us, to be honest, and it's a little bit of a danger in many ways. We also is in a situation with the cinema situation where 75% of the cinemas are owned by a major company, and for them, art house cinema is not really something that they are interested in because they look at numbers. So, and that has been very much clearer now with this. When Corona happened and when COVID happened, we see that it's even harder for us to get our films into any cinema chains that are not our own, because we are also a cinema chain, and to the art house scene. So before we could have some films into the bigger cinemas, now that is hardly happening at all. So we really don't know what's going to happen. And when more and more films are pulled, like the big films are pulled, we don't know what the situation is going to be. So yeah.
I mean, it's a very interesting situation in Sweden because, as you say, not having a lockdown sounds like that's certainly not normal. It's not like you're in a normal situation where everything's changing, but it does kind of point to the reality that some of the adaptation towards this from some of the big players is really squeezing the art house sector. And also, you know, the dangers I think that I don't think we talk enough about in the industry is of a generation that is deprived of the cultural kind of films that and the cultural life that perhaps ought to be there, and the economics you're pointing to don't work for that cultural life.
No, not at all. And I mean, and that's the situation we're in now. And I mean, we are also lucky enough that we have a support system set in place in Sweden. I mean, that's what when we're talking to you guys, that Sweden we got money quite quick from the Swedish Film Institute, and that's not only us, but that support also has to, as you say, I mean, it has to be go much deeper and go much further and really push for the importance of what we do and the importance of our sector, because we have to see it as the culture sector that we are, and not be compared in that way to the major players on the scenes, because we have to see that we work with different things in one way.
Yeah, and I think all we've heard so far. We'll move on to Ira now, but I think the government support you're talking about is largely about survival. It isn't about recovery or what happens afterwards or how we can build on the opportunities. It's about fulfilling the basic thing that you don't just die instantly. But we need to be more than that, and we'll come to that as we go on. Ira.
So in Germany right now, I think we've got the lowest capacity. We're about like 20 to 30% only, because the distancing is not only to the sides, but it's 1.5 meters all around you. And what I can see in the market, especially for art house films, it's like the numbers are okay for summer. Problem is right now, is the summer continuing in autumn and winter, or can we increase? And for example, we had the Correda, La Vérité in the cinemas for 10 days, which was looking quite promising when the lockdown started. We came back with the film as soon as the cinemas opened, 12 weeks later. There was nothing much there. We jumbled around a bit like our lineup. So instead of Seaberg, a drama, which has been to Venice last year, we opened with a comedy, Divana Tunis, which just opened in Italy right now. And this one, unexpectedly, is doing quite well. We're around 60,000 admissions right now. 60,000 to 100,000 is not only in today's world a good result for an art house movie, but also like in last year's world. And we can see it also with the competition. Mika Karusmiki's Master Chang did quite well. The Persian Lessons are doing quite well. So every independent distributor has like one film which works quite well. However, what I can see with the competitions, they doubled and tripled the number of locations. So right now you see an art house film in 300 screens, which is quite a lot. And what we also can see that these kind of feel-good comedies do well. Other art house product, which might be more pure dure, it's difficult. There are lots of films who are not doing even 20,000 admissions right now.
And how much of that is to do? I mean, what we're trying to get to in this first part is the market realities that have nothing. You can't control them. So it's cinema shutting, it's government support, it's all of those things that make today's environment what it is. I'm just trying to get a real sense of how you're operating day to day.
I mean, like, we would have normally released 7 films this year, and right now we are having 5. So we pushed 2 to the next year, to springtime next year, and right now, of course, like, having the fear of the lockdown again, we don't know what will happen with the last 2 films which are planned for this year. And the problem is also in Germany that the regulations are changing from region to region. So the distancing is changing from region to region. In the meantime, it's also changing within the region. So for example, you have like one region like North Rhine-Westphalia, and if you're a hotspot right now, then distancing goes to 2 meters. If you don't have a hotspot, it can go up to 1 meter. So it's like, in the meantime, it's difficult for exhibitors, it's difficult for the audience, because nobody really knows.
Yeah, and it's that confusion, and I guess there's the confusion of policy that all of you have talked about, but there's also the realities that I think every day things keep changing. So, I mean, I was due to have a very nice day in Rome tomorrow, but now the UK government's decided we've got a quarantine if we don't go back today, and it feels we don't know what's going to happen with this next wave either. So there's a lot of things in the air still that really don't allow us to firmly stick to be really confident in the strategies we're doing, because there's a lot of don't knows. And I think you point to something really interesting there, that business doesn't work with confusion. You know, you've got to know what you're operating with, and where you're getting lots of changing rules. I think this is probably true of all of you. There's that sense that's coming across that you think you've got one thing sorted and then something else falls apart. So I think that's important. But the environment we've all looked at across all of those countries is really clear. You are facing really serious challenges that seem to begin with that theatrical market, that even when you reopen, you're still reopening on a much lower basis. And also there is the threat, which I think you're kind of hinting at as well, that some of those cinemas themselves may find that they can't survive on those lower levels, and then you face another issue of closures, which hasn't happened yet, but may happen on a regular basis. So, look, we know that the doom side of that. I'd like the next bit to really focus. I will start with you, Marguerite. I'm just going back along the line, but it's what you're talking about is you still managed to make successes in this. And I think some of that, I think you were hinting at earlier, is that you're always adapting. So I'm just trying to get some concrete ideas of where the adaptation, which is so much part of the DNA of the work you're doing, is actually being applied. You know, where are you finding those successes? How are you finding them? And how might that give you clues for future action?
As I mentioned before, it was a process that was some way already going on. So what we did was we faced the situation of having the chance of having a film in Venice competition. So it was a tough choice, but we said, okay, let's take it. I mean, let's go back in the business. It was obviously, we came from 6 months of lockdown. We came from 6 months of unpaid salaries and tough economical situation, but we said, okay, let's go. And what we decided, we had meetings with the producers of the film, obviously.
Sorry, which film are we talking about?
We are talking about Le Sorelle Macaluso.
Of course, yeah.
The Macaluso sisters. And we said, okay, let's do that. Let's go to Venice and let's release the film day and date with Venice. It's the only thing that makes sense. Obviously, without knowing what was going on, what was going to happen. So we decided to reduce drastically the P&A, because it was the only thing that on which we could have an effect. And so we emphasize the work of curation that we usually do on our film. And we promoted it only by curation, meaning that we really worked with the press a lot. And in terms of promotion, we just did social networks. We didn't do any advertisement at all. We didn't spend any penny in advertisement. And we organized a promotional tour, meaning that we brought the director to those theaters that were brave enough to take the film open, and so we really worked with a small amount of money on a curation of the film, and the result was very good, because the film is still in theater, and so far we did 62,000 admission, which is a lot, and it's the same result that her previous film did without a pandemic. So we can be very happy. And
it's really useful to have a film to think about here. So the P&A is something I know you've thought about before in previous times, but there is a temptation, particularly in government, when it's thinking about how do we support distribution, to say we'll throw loads of money at P&A. But what you're hinting at here is that the traditional form of P&A may actually in itself be overblown as a mechanism for driving demand. And actually, I don't know whether that's film to film or whether you're doing it for every film, but the reduction of P&A is an interesting thought.
Totally, it's. I mean, that's what we're going to do for the next film as well. That's what we did. We also released a very small French film in August, end of August, because obviously the theaters needed the films, so they were taking risks in reopening. So we had to take risks in giving them films. That was a fair partnership. And that film didn't work that well, but finally we are going to do 15,000 admissions, which is fine. And again, that film was released only by a traditional work of curation and no. But that was end of August. It was much difficult for Italy, and the next one, which is a French film called Deux. It's going to be the same. We are working on P&A reduction drastically, and increasing the work of curation with press and what we have to do. And we try to work not only with the cinema press. We try to create a little small event around the film, some kind of warmth around the film. Not only about cinema, it's also about the stories, and like a publisher, a book publisher would do. It's the same. It's very easy to understand when you talk about books, but it's pretty much the same that we try to do with films.
It's that conventional idea that you throw lots of money at traditional P&A,
Yeah.
but actually the role that you're talking about is one in which you're building demand in all kinds of ways. You're understanding, as you say, publishers do, you're understanding the different motivations of audiences, you're understanding how they think. Is that something you think remains after this? Because obviously there's a fear that in the short term, there's perhaps a lack of content in the market. Maybe that you could look at it and say, well, it works in a crisis, but maybe not afterwards. Do you think there's more than that?
No, I think it's going to stay, and I think it was going to happen anyway. It's just happening faster because of the pandemic, but it was going to happen anyway for the kind of films we do. Totally.
I mean, I think that's I think it's a really exciting thought, and it does in lots of ways point to what this panel is all about, which is that's not a distribution mechanism where you just tick a box. This is about a really active involvement in taking that cultural value and that economic value and pushing it through the system. And I think that's a really great example. Who maybe can come with you?
Yeah. Well, I think in our territory the situation is quite complicated in the sense that we have a very strict kind of separation of commercial cinema and art house cinema. And art house cinema is actually in quite a good state, has been for years, but it also means that there is a lot of distributors, smaller distributors, bigger distributors, aiming at this market. So the competition for us, even right after lockdown, quickly became very fierce again. So I completely agree with the idea of curation. I think we always try to be very economical about our spending. We usually do some advertising, but it's usually online nowadays. We hardly ever do print anymore. I mean, but we do make posters. Still, if we think it makes sense, we still do some outdoor, because in our market you have to do something to stand out. If you just do press and promotion, it can work. I mean, it's just really hard to assess, and it really depends on the film as well. I mean, and what I'm now reaching is I've been stubbornly releasing movies over the summer. But now this kind of second wave really is hitting our market, and I'm seriously starting to wonder for the coming months. And this is actually the first time, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs as well are almost stupidly, and distributors, we joked about this beforehand, because we were talking about the weather, and the weather should be good. And I said, well, you're a distributor, so you're expecting things to be better than they are. And I think that must be in our DNA in a way, because I mean, so often you fail, but you still keep trying, right? Because I mean, the amount of successes is always smaller than the amount of failures, at least in my experience. But so you have to limit your losses when you fail. So in that sense, you have to be economical, otherwise you don't survive. but in terms, I think Ira also said an interesting thing about comedies. It seems that people are looking for, well, this is something in general already noticeable, that art house audiences are also looking for lighter stuff, but the more dire the circumstances, the more likely they are to look for comedy and light entertainment, I guess. But yeah, at the same time, we are distributors, and we've done our acquisitions over the last years, or years, so to speak. So you can adapt your schedule, but you can't really adapt what you have in your basket, so to speak. So it's you can't entirely switch directions or something. You know, you just have to work with what you have as well, and the circumstances in sense of competition and so. So yeah, we had a nice success as well, which was, I think, also had lots of comedy elements, but also a drama that did quite well. Madre was quite a surprising success. We spent very little on the P&A as well. The press did very well, but we didn't have a director present or anything. It's just the word of mouth, and you have to be a bit lucky also with the week in our case, and I think this probably goes for many territories as well. You have to be able to be kind of one of the films of the week. It's sort of, it has to surface in the press and in people's conversations, and that's what we try to achieve every time. And sometimes we are also unlucky with circumstances. Our last film, to be concrete again, was Lara, beautiful German movie, which I personally liked a lot. But 2 weeks before our planned release, another distributor announced that they were going to do the Sofia Coppola movie. And they just put it on the market in 2 weeks, and all the cinemas booked it, of course. All the press ran after it, so that became a really big film. And then there was another Dutch film that won all the prizes in the Dutch.
But in a sense, that's always the case. I mean, trying
in a
to
way,
get
yes,
into
yes.
the conversation.
And funny,
I'm interested. I mean, I remember a distributor telling me once that distribution was the triumph of hope over experience, and I always thought that was I'm sure that's true. But
that's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah.
But there is a kind of sense that even given that optimism, I just wonder whether in the market that you've now got, whether there is a change of attitude or thinking from exhibitors on one side and maybe producers on the others. Do you think there's any sense of change in thinking when you're making these initiatives and you're doing these things and you're trying to get that conversation and you're trying to get past the problems that we now face, whether you notice a positive change of attitude?
I think that's too theoretical. I think we do the same thing under more difficult circumstances, to be very honest with you.
Right.
But we have, I mean, now what I'm saying is now I'm really considering whether I should change my plans for the coming months. But that would be a negative rather than a positive change, to be honest with you.
No, you can say there's nothing positive. That's fine. That's certainly how a lot of us feel.
The positive thing is that we're surviving.
Yeah.
I mean, and also the positive thing is that we did some good TV sales.
Yeah.
And the positive thing is that the media program stepped in very quickly, which I really appreciate, and that we're going to benefit from, as I said. So, I mean, I'm confident that we'll survive this.
I think there's something you're saying which we might address just as we're going through, just in passing. But the idea that audiences want anything at any particular time, there is quite a lot of evidence now coming back from the VOD sector that actually people want comedy 1 minute, and then you think, oh, I'm going to make loads of comedies, and by the time the comedies come through, people are thinking, oh, I don't want to laugh anymore. I've had enough of this. I want to do. So there is, and that's not the way it works. So again, I think people will feel your pain, but I think that sense of belief in what you're doing still needs to be retained.
I think so too, because that's also something I experienced, and yeah, you just have to do what you believe in, and hopefully you can transmit that to your audience. I mean, I think that's a very relevant thing about being a distributor, and that's where the publishing idea comes in again. Yes.
Okay, Oscar.
No, but I can agree with a lot of things that you say, I mean, or that both of you say. I mean, the curation of everything is getting more and more important, of course. But we are also in Sweden in the situation where, as you say, that we have fewer and fewer screens, and now when we're opening up after lockdown, the competition from art house distributors is, if not as hard as before, but harsher, because we're stubborn, so we keep on we keep on releasing our films. I mean, we can have 4 to 5 releases a week of art house films in the same number of cinemas, yes, but with fewer people that can see the films, this is not going to work. I mean, this is not going to be working in the long run, and we have to adapt what we do in a way from what we're doing now. But this has been a discussion for quite a long time in Sweden, that all us, our art house distributor, have to think a little bit about how we do it and what we do. And now I think we're getting to a very critical situation, to be honest. But for us, it's also, we have a cinema chain. We have 17 cinemas in Sweden. They don't only screen our films, sadly. They also screen all art house distributors. But what's really important now is that we're getting tighter and tighter with them. We have a much more conversation. We help them much more. We curate programs for them. We talk a lot about more, and how do you market these films? How do you market our films, so to say, and how do you do this? So that is taking quite a lot more time and effort, which is of course fun and interesting, but it's a big effort. But you started talking about VOD a little bit, and we have the initiative from Gothenburg Film Festival called Draken Film, which is a VOD platform, and we have started cooperating much more with them. And Swedish documentaries, for example, is our backbone from the beginning, and that's films that in Sweden's been seen by, if we're lucky, 1,000 people, maybe 1,500 people, and that's if we're lucky. These films we started curating much more and much stronger on their platform. So if the director has made one film, we try and like a few films before, we're trying to take all in distribution, putting one in a very, very small cinema release, and then putting the rest on Draken Film, for example. So we're trying to find ways of curating programs, curating our films, and curating what we do much stronger.
You can, I mean, there's a kind of hope in there that you would see VOD perhaps as a complementary service, rather than I think the narrative of replacement, I think, has always been wrong. I think that's an odd view that's been pushed. But that complementary element of, here's the curation over here that seems to fit with the release that we're doing elsewhere. Do you think that kind of balance can turn into something sustainable over the longer term?
I think so, yes. I mean, it won't bring the same revenue, of course, as it is a cinematic release. I mean, that won't be possible. But it is giving us a possibility to work with these titles that otherwise we would actually have to turn down much more, because we wouldn't have the possibility to do it. So I think it's good for the environment and what is actually being screened, and the diversity of what's going to be screened in the cinemas. There, I think it can have a little bit of, I see some kind of hope there, but it's like revenue-wise, no.
Yes, it's complementary rather than a replacement. Of course, Sweden, all of Scandinavia, kind of famously is a place that has embraced the online viewing much more strongly than certainly than Italy, I would think. So I guess there's something there. Can we move to Ira? Because there's quite a few points that are coming out of this from all of you.
Yeah. What shall I talk now? I mean, like, our problems were always that even if we would love to decrease our P&A spend, it would be really difficult, because of course postering is in a world where you've got a lockdown, not a possibility. It's very clear to promote a movie. However, I mean, like, our cost in Germany, the technical costs alone are normally 60% of the whole P&A spend, because the dubbing is so expensive, because all the dubbing studios are working for the streamers and dubbing series, and of course that takes time. And most of our publicity money, advertisement money, goes to the cinemas, to the exhibitors, for being present on their websites, for being present in their programs, in the printed programs. So we pay a lot for that too. So it's very difficult to decrease that even in this difficult time. And for the streamers, I mean, like, streamers for us in Germany took over the pay TV, the missing pay TV interest in art house movies. But then streamers have to take also over for the decreasing video numbers. And the streamers in the meantime also have to take over for the TV stations, for the free TV license. So it's like, of course, like a streamer can't take over everything what we do.
No, I'm interested that because I mean the economic realities. I think we've got to look at and we've got to think about those very seriously. But could you give us some examples just on how a release of yours is kind of in this market? Because what you're pointing to here is that you would like to be as adaptable in some ways. You'd like, all of you were talking about flexibility and adaptability. If it's not good, if you can't say it, it's already a problem. So adaptability is fine, except there are things that you're not allowed to adapt to, even if you would like to.
It's, I mean, like, releasing a film only subtitle in Germany is not a choice. It's, of course, like, you don't have to spend, but the point is, you know that you wouldn't get interest in audiences because German audiences are still not acclimatized to subtitled films in cinemas. They can watch it on video, on streamers, and television, but still for cinemas they demand the German version. And in Germany right now, I mean, like, even for a smaller film, it's about like 40 to 50 to 60 to 70,000 euros only for the German dub.
Yeah.
So it's really a lot.
So there are whatever the environment, whatever is happening all around you, there are fixed costs that you simply cannot ignore. Whatever happens, you've got to dub these films. You've got to fit within the rules that are there at the moment. That's the same for all films, which I guess means economically, whatever you're releasing, it's got to be a huge hit to get to the level of just a decent return.
Yes, because like if you're going to television, I mean, like, the big TV stations are only interested in American or Americanized product. So you need a star and you need the numbers in cinemas. If you don't have that, you go to the small TV station. The small TV station won't give you even the money that you spend for the dub. So, I mean, like, which in the end, if you do the numbers, doesn't give you the chance to recoup yourself on the P&A, but neither on the minimum guarantee.
No. I mean, the temptation, which is the concern, I think, for a lot of art house film fans, is that this environment pushes people towards more conservative choices, that they end up doing things that they think are going to be there at the expense of what they believe in. I wonder if any of you have had any, because you all seem to have decided you're still going to stick with the films that you believe in, but there is that fear, I think, that somehow we might lose some of it.
I had the feeling like months ago that I could be more daring in my choices. Because if I take an Americanized movie for 500,000 as an MG, I could take a European movie, and with unknowns, if I like it better, it might make the same results in cinemas, and I might have even more joy doing that. In today's world, I'm not so sure about that anymore.
No, but I would a little bit agree with that. I think there is a way of daring in it, that is like, I think we really have an idea about like what kind of art house films we do. We have a strong identity, and I think we rather push that identity even harder, because I think we get the more or less the same number than if we're trying to do something that is slightly more mainstream, but that we have to pay more for. I think it's a time now for us to actually get our identity even stronger, even getting it harder. And really pushing for that, and I mean being more daring and maybe even more political. I mean that's where we come from. I mean, like as Folkets Bio, that's where the history that we come from. So I see a positive and exciting, almost not exciting, I shouldn't say that, but a time where we can really push what we do even further.
I totally agree with this point of view. This is a moment where the only thing that can save us is to keep on doing what we are good at, not trying to compromise with something we're not able to do, or trying to find movies that are not what we believe in. And so, yeah, I totally share your point of view.
But at the same time, I fully agree with you guys as well. But at the same time, in my assessment of a film, I always consciously or subconsciously take into account whether I think it will be a success as well. I mean, I don't just take it for the value of the joy of watching it. You know, I also think, can I work with it? That's just always
course,
the second
absolutely.
thought. That makes our work also quite complicated sometimes.
But do you think the exhibitors are where they've got to get money in for the 60 seats they've got or whatever? Do you think they are being more conservative, or do you find it harder to get the message of a difficult film?
I think they're quite frantic at the moment, yeah. And also, I mean, I don't feel a lot of solidarity from the exhibitors, to be honest, which I don't expect. I mean, they're in a tough situation as well, but they're frantically looking for successes. And also with the example of the Coppola one, it also went to cinemas which normally wouldn't show this kind of film, and it kind of drove out my film in my view. I mean, nobody literally said that to me, but it was quite clear to me that, because we had a hard time booking the film. In cinemas where it normally would easily go to, but they were so stressed also about their revenues that they were choosing the easy option. You know, Bill Murray sells more tickets than a German movie, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah, but we should also mention that the Apple Plus film, the Sofia Coppola, and the Netflix films are sold off for less money than ours to the cinemas, to the exhibitors, because normally they only in Germany they are. In Germany, I mean, like they only have to give back 30% of the income.
Oh, really?
And
No.
for our movies, it's more like 45.
Not that I know of. I
And
think
then they're really open with all the Netflix movies. In some of the cinemas, it's really awful because like they're waiting for Netflix movies. It's like they prefer Netflix movies to anything else.
Yeah, sure. If they have to pay less.
But yeah, but that compromise is. I mean, all that I'm getting when I'm listening to all of you is that someone has to be the protector and the champion of these things. And I think, you know, the Macalusa Sisters is not you making a conservative choice, is it? That's a difficult film in the market. But if you have to believe in this thing, if you don't believe in this, we really are in serious trouble moving forward, because you know, who is going to make sure that this stuff stays alive? And I think that's a really dangerous moment we're in right now. Or maybe I'm exaggerating. I don't know.
No, we are in a dangerous moment, especially from the cultural point of view, for sure, because this kind of products, which is not only a product, but it's much more, obviously is in danger, that's for sure. That's what, I mean, it's something political we are doing. I strongly believe in that, and we are trying to keep on doing that. And we have to, yes, absolutely, we have to believe in that. Obviously, even when I buy a film, I always make my consideration on the whole chain of exploitation. So I try to buy something that I feel I can sell to TV, I can have a nice feedback from VOD. Obviously, I'm running a business, I'm not running a charity or a festival, unfortunately. So, but still, we try at Teodora to do what we are good at, meaning bringing films we do believe that.
I think this leads to the conversation really is the positive that comes out of all of this is, look, there are other ways you can do things. You can do things by adapting. You could take a difficult film because you're good at these things and find new ways of curation, new approaches. You can work it with a complementary approach to VOD. The question for me is if I see a future in that discussion. But what do you need? What is needed in our industry to ensure that you are able to carry on doing those things? And that comes down to a whole lot of factors. And maybe we could just start off with public funding, because it seems to me that public funding from the national film funds, from the regional film funds, it's not where money is given to distribution at all. It's given to an idea of distribution which is pretty much tied to the past in some ways. And it seems like a useful moment to be talking to the funds and saying, if you want this, here's how you can support. This is what we need. So maybe we'll start with you, Margarita. What is it that you need and could be useful?
For sure, we would need public funds, because everybody needs funds in this moment. But we also need, I think, from the state and from the association, a communication, creating awareness of what we do, the importance of what distributors do. We basically don't exist for many people. They don't know what we do, and the way we create value around a product, a film. So there should be more communication about awareness of the cultural importance of what we do. And in this particular moment, I think we should create awareness, more awareness on the fact that cinemas are safe places. This is something that it's not said enough. It's not communicated enough, and it should be.
Yeah, so there is. I mean, that awareness element is important, but I sometimes wonder whether the way that film funds are set up, the way that you support film, and I was chair of a film fund, so there is that feeling of that the incentives, the real incentives, are the number of productions you support. That's high, and box office is very high. And it's the feeling that. Do you think when you're talking about film funds helping create awareness, does every film fund really understand what you do in ways that would allow you to go to them and say, look, if you give us this, we're doing this curation thing here, so forget the P&A funding, this is where we want you to focus.
Absolutely, because we should work. We should do a much deeper teamwork with the other elements of the chain. The fact that in Italy you have funds, public funds, especially for production and for exhibitors, but distribution, they barely exist.
Yeah. No, I think the funding is a complicated one because in Holland there was funding for distributors. This was also P&A funding, and it was called slate funding. But the fact of the matter is that in Holland, actually, the market is overcrowded in a way. So, what I would propose personally is more like an automatic fund, because the thing is, these films all had to comply to a lot of rules, and those rules actually made those films not interesting to buy. Because it's a bit blunt maybe, but they were real festival films because you get more points. The smaller the film, basically, the more points you get. So this kind of, it's almost like a polluting mechanism. I don't mean to offend anyone, but the less likely a film would be to be distributed, the more likely it would be to be funded. So this is kind of an adverse mechanism to the market. So. And automatic funding is rather the opposite. It funds success. So the more tickets you sell, the more automatic you generate, the more films you can buy. So that's an industry strengthening mechanism. And I think most funds always want to really interfere in the content of the distributor, as if they don't trust the distributor to make those choices themselves. And I think the funding should be based on the track record of a distributor, and then just give support their organization to do what they're good at. That would be my simple.
It is interesting that there's an element of subjectivity that was clearly there. So, as a fund, you have to support cultural film. So how you draw the line, if you don't have some automatic system, you draw a cultural line by a subjective view that no one's going to watch this, therefore it's cultural.
Almost,
and that seems to me such a dangerous attitude towards culture.
It is, and it really disturbs the market because it floods the market with films, and the audience cannot distinguish anymore because there's too many releases. So it's really money not well spent, I think, and I think you can trust the curative instincts. I mean, I'm sure if you want to have a cultural support, I understand there must be some kind of standards you want to uphold or something. But if you see the track record of a certain distributor, you can trust the fact that they will consistently buy high quality films. So there's no reason if you give them money that they should change this. I mean. And you can also make mechanisms that they don't pocket the money and buy a house, but actually use it for distribution, which I think it works very well in the automatic system because you have to spend it on either P&A or acquiring new films. I think it's a very smart and very effective mechanism.
Yeah, so. I mean, I think the thing that worries me with Margaritas is that curation is driving demand, but at the same time, support for curation as an idea is actually it's not at the heart of film funding.
No, exactly.
And I think there's perhaps something that we need to get together and talk about. And just one other thing, I think when you're talking there about flooding, we talk about there not being enough content in cinemas, but at the same time, the number of European productions has gone up exponentially over the last kind of 20 years. So where are these films if they're going to work?
It's a tricky one. It's a very tricky one. It's a big paradox.
Yeah, Oscar.
I mean, we're in a little different situation here again. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm talking about Sweden as some kind of
The voice from paradise.
The paradise, yeah, because we get funding. I mean, now we're in the third wave of funding for the COVID. I mean, we're getting emergency fund for the third time. Hopefully, they will let us know on Monday. And when it comes to general support, I mean, we do get a kind of a slate support, and we also get a support for our general. Actually, what we do, I mean, we get money for a certain amount of films that foreign films that we take in every year, and then also a kind of a general support for our main, like for our organization, so to speak. And then in addition to that, we apply for funds for Swedish films. I mean, so we're quite lucky when it comes to this, to say the least.
So the Northern Paradise is where we should, because the answer is that I remember talking to a French, someone from the CNC, and saying, what's the answer to Europe's problems? And he said, everyone should be French, which, so maybe everyone should be Swedish is our answer here.
But at the
I
same
can
time,
apply for citizenship, yeah.
Exactly. No, but at the same time, I mean, we also have the awareness discussion as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that what we do and that the art house has to be lifted as something, so it's a cultural, something cultural and nothing else. So that is also something we struggled with as well, because when we look at when we're talking about the emergency funds now, we as the art house distributor get money, but also the big cinema chains that is actually owned from, that they also get funds, which for us is absolutely absurd, to be honest, to give millions to a multi-billion-dollar company.
They don't need the money, do they?
They
Really?
They don't need the money, and
No.
and for them there is no money. It's coffee money for them, and for us it would mean the world. So it's a really weird situation when we think about that as well. So something is paradise, some things is not.
And it is worth pointing out that it still feels to me we're not having the broad discussion that allows us to learn from each other's support mechanisms necessary in a systematic way. Sweden's bloody cold and dark for at least 6 months a year as well, just in case you were thinking about moving there.
Summers are nice, though.
Summers are nice, but
Yeah,
no, it's
yeah.
not
Everybody
that
has a
nice.
country house.
Yeah, you have to put things on your wheels. Anyway, we'll talk about Sweden afterwards, but
Germany a bit less
Just
north,
getting
a
going.
bit less paradise. No, I mean, our problem right now, of course, like we have national funding, but national funding is openly economic funding, so you have to have a film that does at least 200,000 missions. And the regional funding is kind of better, but what I can see, I mean, the promises especially from the regional funds, to help the German distributors were mostly concerned German movies. I don't see more distributors getting money. I see few distributors getting more money for the movies. But again, this goes to the studios most of the time, because in Germany, lots of the studios do German movies with a buyout for all rights. So again, we have nothing here for minority German co-production. There are lots of minority German co-productions happening. There's no money coming to that. There's no money coming to European product. There's no money coming to non-European product. So it's really difficult there. I think that especially the regional funds should do more about companies who are sitting in the region, which they did several years ago, but unfortunately that stopped completely, to cherish also what we're doing, because like from every ticket that we're selling, the National Film Fund will get money too. So in one way, we're funding the whole economy, but we don't get anything out of that.
yeah, I'm just trying to understand what I'm trying to design quickly a support mechanism that would work for you, and it seems to me there's a number of things. One is that stop thinking film to film and start thinking about the businesses that have the expertise in the market. That seems to be critical to all of you. That if you believe in curation, support the curators. Don't just think that you're going to give money to every individual film, and then whoever picks that up is equally good. So I'm not quite sure how that works. I mean, has anyone got an idea about how you can make a fund which directly supports curators?
Well, you can do yeah, it's a bit complicated, but you could do a kind of a mix between automatic support and a certain level of quality control. Somebody has to say, okay, you get in, and once you qualify as a distributor for the quality of your product, and you can measure it by the amount of stars you get in the press or something, then you get in, and then you generate money even from the first ticket you sell. If a film fails, but you get you have 5,000 admissions, still you get 5,000 euros or the half to spend again on next one.
I think relying on the critics seems to me.
Your next critic, right?
Yeah. Good luck with that one. I don't. And there's an element potentially of problems of incentivizing.
It's tricky. It's always tricky to judge quality. I mean, whether there's a commission judging films or if you devise point systems, it also becomes like I just pointed out, because first or second film gets more points. Certain festivals get more points. Regions where the film comes from. If it comes from Kazakhstan, it gets more points than when it comes from France. So but this automatically means that it's less commercial.
I can see all the problems immediately, and part of the problem is that the great curators are the ones that take risks. So you don't want to incentivize people not to take risks. It feels to me like you are offering the potential to get back to a point where culture matters, but I want to work out how to support you, and I don't really yet entirely understand, other than your point, which is we definitely need a campaign, don't we, to support the idea of cultural film, to support the idea of the cinema and the cinema being open. We need to change our names. I mean, I'm seriously considering calling myself not film distribution, but film publishing, or in Dutch, film uitgeverij. It sounds good. And it immediately makes clear what you're doing. And film distribution seems like we're shoving boxes. So it's a very simple thing, and I don't need to change my name in the Chamber of Commerce. But you can change your business name in online. You can do it. Something like Notflix would be good. I think we've got a point from the.
Just saying that actually at the association level, several associations, Europa Distribution among them, changed that.
Okay.
Distributor to publisher, because we think it's giving a better ad.
Okay. So actually, this term is it's not something which is entirely radical. The Europa Distribution itself, that there are organisations that are now putting publishing as part of this, and it feels to me like quite a profound change. It's not just branding, and this is where your awareness things comes in. It's really a sense of understanding what it is that you do, what it is the value you provide, and that feels to me like a problem.
Yeah, because the fact that films are cultural objects like books, it's something that it's not so commonly thought.
Yeah.
So, but it is like that. I mean, films can be cultural objects, exactly like books. But when you think about books, when people averagely think about books, the connection with culture is quite immediate, and it's not the same with films. We should work on that concept as well.
That's one side of it, yeah.
It's a big point, though. Sorry, Uri.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we also have to see that we're also we're trying to fight against the globalization of film marketing, because every one of us, I think, is trying to find a campaign which works on a national audience. So we've got different tastes in our audiences. So it's like already the selection of movies, but then the posters, the trailers, everything will be selected not via somebody else in America or from the sales agent, but everybody does his own work. Yeah.
And no one questions publishing. I mean, it's the kind of thing that's a light bulb moment for lots of people, which is, of course, you're publishers. Of course you are. And when you think about publishing rather than distribution, suddenly the need to support becomes very, very clear. The role that you're taking becomes very, very clear. I think maybe we've still got some work to be doing on specifically how that support might come, but it doesn't seem like something beyond our potential. I mean, we find ways to support cultural film at production level that have all kinds of weird little things going in there. So I think you're all arguing that once you start thinking differently, the support perhaps becomes different. So away from public funds, the value chain itself, it seems to me, is how the industry gets together and thinks as one and works together. You've all pointed to some areas where the tensions are strong, and I wonder how we're going to overcome those, because they're going to have to be overcome one way or another. Maybe we could start with you, Ira. I just wonder if where we have problems, how do we overcome them?
I mean, like in one of the trades last week, there was like the sentence, the headline, "We are all in this together." The producers, the exhibitors, the distributors, the sales companies, and what I've seen in the last few years that everybody's running away from the movies to do a series.
Yeah.
And of course they're coming back because they find this Netflix world, the Amazon world is not as perfect as they might have thought, but it takes some time and they keep us hanging on. And I mean, like, even so we might be daring, but we also need better product. We need product that has been really to the last stages during post-production and not like cutting the post-production short because a release date is set according to the availability of Swedish cinemas, or the release date has been set, or the end of post-production date has been set because the directors want to do a series. So it's like you have to cherish what you have and you have to work for that too.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix is no Sweden. I think we need to make that clear. That should be on a poster somewhere. But I think this is really important here, that maybe that role, the expertise that you have, needs to be further, you need to be involved at a development stage in a more systematic way. I mean, a lot of you are already.
At an earlier stage, exactly. That's exactly what we did with Macaluso Sisters. That was some kind of project, because we were lucky enough to work with the producers before the shooting, before at the script stage, and it was a successful process because all the elements were in this together, and the process involves all of them, and that was quite successful. And I think it's a key element, because sometimes we are involved at a very late stage and we cannot bring the expertise that we have, and it might be better for everyone.
Yeah, but it's easier with national movies. I mean, like we do that with every German movie that we have.
Absolutely, it was possible because it was a national movie. It's much more difficult when you have to do it with a non-national movie, of course.
Yeah, but then the sales agents are involved usually, and they do some work for us, and sometimes very good work.
Sometimes.
Yeah. No, I had the same experience recently with the Dutch film, and
sometimes
officially you have to be involved in the poster design and the trailer design, but they just had very limited budget, and they just immediately they had it done before they even came to us, and it wasn't the best. I won't name names, but I've seen better.
Well, name names. You might as well.
No, not this time.
You're wearing a mask. They won't know who you are. Who was that masked man that criticised us?
I told them as well.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, you talked a little bit about the exhibitors, and it's like and the solidarity, the lack of solidarity.
Yeah.
I think that is also, to be honest, a thing that has to be addressed even more. I mean, we are businesses, but they are also businesses, of course. But if we are going to survive, and if this kind of art form is going to survive, they also have to be more solidaric to a certain kind of films as well. We have to find funds and possibilities to support that. I mean, there must be like more funds to be able to support that, so they actually can have the possibility to screen this more, so they don't run for Coppola, so they don't run for whatever it is. I mean, we see the theaters that we normally see, or cinemas that we normally see as art house that's screening Tenet, and that shouldn't happen, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes down this. I mean, the headlines like "We're all in this together." I mean, it's such a. I would never have allowed that if I was still an editor. But it's that kind of. Whenever you see that kind of headline, you know that someone's more in it than someone else, and it's a nice idea, and it does feel like this is a moment. I think you're all pointing to this. This is a moment where the only potential that really comes out is a moment for a reset, for a positioning, a rethinking, based not on individual needs and survival, but actually based on the idea that this matters, what we do matters, what the films that we're doing can change lives, they can make a difference. If we don't believe in that, then we should all go home. But that reset feels to me like there's a conversation, but I don't know what the mechanism is for having that serious conversation that incentivizes people to listen and look. Has anyone got any idea? Maybe we'll... what we did last night is have some antipasti and some grappa, and maybe we should just get a giant bottle of grappa and bring everyone in. But there has to be that conversation, doesn't there? We can't keep going on having this, because we could have this conversation, as you were saying, a long time before, but it feels like it's more essential now, and maybe what we need to do is, what you were saying, is that that sense of emergency, that we need to do something.
Yes, I think we should strongly go to the category associations and strongly ask for answers, for acts, and for something concrete. That's the only thing that we can do. And clearly, we can also try to be in this together concretely, meaning talking to producers, talking to exhibitors, and trying to be a group asking for help, not just a category.
And you know, I think you're all saying you understand where cinemas are coming from, because all of us are trying to survive at the moment. So it feels to me like what we're trying to move beyond here is a conversation about survival, and then a conversation about the health and meaning of art house films, so that it has a future. But it's survival strategies and public funding are easy to develop. Building out of where we are now is much more complex, and it involves a whole lot of discussions that really need to be pragmatic, they need to be flexible, they need to be adaptable, and that's not really what we're good at as an industry, I think.
Very true, very true. I tried a couple of, like a year ago or something, because I think the problems haven't really changed, but they have just become more urgent recently. So maybe we should have another try to get everybody together and openly discuss it, and not just walk away home and think, maybe we should, but now I'm going to book that film anyway. So that, yeah, but it will take more than one conversation, yeah, and it will really, it's hard to really find that commitment, but it will take some stamina, yeah.
But again, maybe if the conversation isn't quite so narrow as it has been, maybe if it's not about me as a business, but that sense of culture and art house and film. So what else do we need to be doing right now? So this conversation's been clear. Right now, it's pretty miserable apart from Sweden. It's pretty miserable time. Things could get worse. I mean, things could very easily get worse. And we're at the point where public funding, it's probably some of the public funding that we are saying is good, that has allowed some businesses to survive, could disappear. So, and cinemas, we don't know how long cinemas are going to be closed for, or how long the economics of cinema can keep going. So when we're looking beyond that, we've talked about a more flexible public funding system. We've talked about a campaign that allows us to at least change the conversation. We've talked about relationships. I'm just interested, if any of you got anything else that we need to be doing now that will allow us to think about that long-term future that you publishers can help lead? You have got ideas.
I believe that the TV stations and the streamers should take more product, because right now, what I can see for several years now, that especially in Germany, TV stations try to create their own German product, but with that, they're cutting out art house movies, and they're cutting out a different point of view in the world. Because the point of view is right now really German in television, and we need diversity also there. And I mean, like, we're always paying for the TV stations, so they should get back to us too, and put also, like, perhaps not so comfortable art house films, but also them on the schedule.
Yeah, that's I can really support that idea. I've been quite disappointed with public TV in the Netherlands as well for a long time. They have never actually given any real priority to showing art house movies, and it's in our case it has to do with that there's a huge amount of networks that you're not calling them networks, but they can create their own programs, and they have a lot of money to create those programs, and they're only focused on doing that, and not on acquiring. They acquire series as well, because they want to compete with Netflix, but cinema is not on their priority list and hasn't been for a long time, and I think it should be, and it's also an extension of this cultural value in the cinemas. And I mean, they do buy something, but it's really limited, and it should be much more. Yeah.
I think the cliche that everyone now wants series, and that somehow the human beings have gone off films, and we now are all.
That's actually what the buyer for Dutch TV literally says to me. He says people are only interested in series; they don't watch cinema on the TV.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No. It's good to know that someone's. Well, it's not good to know. It's depressing to know that someone actually thinks that way. But that is the narrative. I mean, I don't think it's a small thing, Margarita. You were talking about this at the beginning. We've got to change the narrative. I mean, the narrative seems to me so boringly. The new normal is always a move from cinema to digital. Like every human being in the world is now they're analog and they're becoming digital. And they used to like having social watching of things, and now they like what, and that's just not true. That's economics and the power of having these huge platforms coming in with massive budgets to come in and get into our heads. But it's just simply not the case, and that narrative has to change. And I don't know how we change it, but it has to be done. And I think probably publishing is where that narrative resides and needs to make that difference.
At least it's a very good step, yeah.
I don't know how we do it. You must know, Margarita. You look like you know everything.
Thank you, but no. No, I don't know. I think we should, as I was saying at the beginning, we should work on a strong communication about this. We should make films exist as well, changing the narrative, because it's a key element. And we should create awareness about the importance of cinema, the fact that films are cultural objects, and as we said, that's something that the Ministry of Culture and the association should do.
Yeah.
But strongly, massively, not just.
I mean, when you're talking about TV, it's so obviously changed from when I was a kid. Obviously, there was 2 channels of TV, and you watched, and it showed a certain amount of film. Again, I'd just like to talk a little bit about that European international culture. The support that is coming in at the moment seems to be all about supporting your national films. And I'm not, when you're thinking about cultural meaning and importance, it's actually vital that we engage on that broader level. And that was seen as an obvious part of culture when I was growing up. And now it feels like we're moving further and further away from it.
Yeah.
It should be the action of the media agency, actually. They should improve a little bit on that side.
Well, and it seems to be almost like playing into the hands of this kind of narrowing world of nationalism, where you just keep focusing more and more on what's yours and what you already know, instead of, looking out into the world and finding out what's there and gaining an understanding for different things and, enriching your life, really.
There is, I mean, it does seem to me there's a big. This perhaps explains where your role is different. So the world is better. Netflix is good at giving you what you think you want. It uses the algorithm, and I'm not criticizing. It's just the way it is. All around us, people have got to know more about our data, and then they just give you more of it. So in the end, you stop finding what, to me, culture is about, which is finding the things you didn't know you were interested in. You didn't know. They became important to you because you were exposed to them.
That should be a key role also in education. I mean, at schools level, this should be very important. I mean,
but I also think we should a little bit take the narrative back and take the question back about about the diversity. Example for Netflix, all of a sudden, Netflix is praised for their diversity work. And I mean, if you look at who actually give diverse content, I wouldn't say it's Netflix in general. It's actually us. And when we start talking about that Netflix is actually creating diverse content, which they do in one way, I would say that in general, I wouldn't say that we can't rely on saying that we get a diversity, like actually giving it to Netflix.
No, there is also an argument that I think is becoming clear. When you watch a lot of Netflix, they do commission local series, but sometimes it feels like they're commissioning something which is American but is made in Swedish. You're watching it. There's no sensibility that feels to me something that you would recognise.
And that's local again. I mean, that's because there's now going to be a Dutch new law that and it's basically geared towards Netflix, that they have to invest in local content, but it goes across the whole industry, and the discussion is now also that cinema should invest, but this is a detailed discussion which I won't go into, but the idea is that they should invest in the local industry, which is, I think it's good for from an economical and local cultural point of view. I mean, I don't oppose it at all, but it's another focus on this locality instead of, you know, the world out there, which
and that is the world that you operate in, and it's the world that we need to get into people's culture. Has anyone got any questions or points they'd like to make from the floor? It's a wide-ranging discussion here, so I'm sure if anyone's got any ideas or thoughts. I can't tell whether you're frowning or smiling or anything. Yes. Could I grab a mic over here? Yeah, talk. I'll tell you what. Talk. Yeah, we'll need to have a. Sorry, I should have. We could take one of these mics. No, here we go. This needs to be a good question now.
Hi, my name is Juan Castro. I'm a sales agent. I work with a German distribution company, and I'm a sales agent also for a distribution from Latin America with Quechua films from Spain. I was wondering, with this panorama, how does it look to acquire now titles in other languages? As you were commenting that it's very expensive in Germany to do dubbing and so on. It's like, is it a chance for foreign language content?
For us, it's
roughly.
Yeah.
Yes.
For us, it's very normal that in Holland everything is subtitled. We're a very small territory or small
but
country.
Talking about dubbing, which is more expensive.
No. We only subtitle.
You don't need to.
So and the audience is used to subtitling for everything.
You need to dub in Italian.
We have to dub everything, yes, but we're still there to do acquisitions.
All right.
So far, then
I'll call you.
who knows?
And Sweden don't dub either, so we only dub children films. But except that, we do subtitles, so that's not a problem for us, really.
How likely is to acquire that kind of content? Because in the UK, where I was based until March, it was very complicated to arrive with Spanish-speaking content.
Yeah.
Because of the sensibilities, likeness, etc. So how likely is...
In our territory, this is this is not really a problem. Of course, it's easier to come up with English-speaking content because the audience speaks, the general audience, especially the art house audience, is quite apt in English. But it's normal to see films from all over the world and subtitled, and people are very used to reading subtitles and hearing the original sound.
And I guess likely if they are awarded. So it's easier to promote, I guess. If they have awards.
There's always a selection process. So the point is, like, of course, like if you've got a South American film which has been selected by the A festivals, you will take a look at that. And for example, when we released Wild Tales or El Clan, this has a festival career which we knew already when we were buying the movie.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked enough about the festivals, because festivals, again, the disruption. Thank you. And you really hit a core point again, which is certainly in the UK, foreign language film has collapsed as a market. We don't have sensibilities in the UK anymore. We're just drifting out there. We're going to be disappearing into the horizon somewhere. But I think I think that feeling of again that you're touching on is. The diversity that we all say that we want disappears if there isn't the economics to actually deliver diverse content to diverse audiences, and that is the danger. Okay, look, we've nearly at the end anyway. So what I'd like to do is just finish. So we started off with a sense of the environment we're operating in and the difficulties we've got. We've no doubt about that. And I think, you should be congratulating on still being there. And as you rightly say, that is that hope and that optimism. But more than that, it's that belief that what you do matters and the films that you're supporting matter. I think that from that point on, we then were looking at how within that environment you are surviving, which is, to me, is about adaptation and flexibility and pragmatism. You can't afford the luxury of ideology. What you've got here, I think, is a belief that what you do can reach audiences. And however difficult those films might be, you can adapt and you can get those into people's consciousness. And it seems to me that's an essential part of the world that you operate and the world that we want to live in. If you can't get people to watch things that they don't know they want to watch, then we're finished. I mean, that to me is where the end of the civilized world kind of has gone. So that's necessary. I think the point you're making that to me, I think it's almost underplayed. The idea that your publishers seems to me it's such a mind-changing attitude that there's a switch that goes on that's kind of, yeah, well, now I'm thinking differently. Now I'm realizing that my thought that this is the glue between two key parts of the value chain starts disappearing, and I start seeing the whole of the value chain in terms of, yeah, of course, diverse content, diverse audiences, what brings those together? Publishers. It seems like a very obvious thing. But that we are still, it seems to me, you're getting support to survive, but you're not yet, there's not yet an environment in terms of public funding or in terms of attitudes from the whole value chain that will allow that to become something which is that can thrive, that can allow us to go beyond survival into those next stages. I think it's very difficult, and I've put you on the spot to try and work out what it is that you wanted. I think that you've pointed really strongly to public funding needs to get past its analog period, and the perhaps some quite narrow ideas about what distributors do towards a broader understanding and a broader support that allows you as curators and publishers to curate and publish. And that seems to me like a conversation that isn't unilateral for you. That's a conversation that the industry as a whole has to have. And we aren't yet in the stage, I think, of thinking that allows that conversation to happen. But it will have to happen. And I think it will happen because the choices are too dangerous. And Margarita's pointing to a crisis seems to me completely right. This is a key moment in the history of film. And if we don't support the people that actually put that value and create that demand, we are in a world that's dominated by algorithms or dominated by the short-term economic realities that lead us to the end of our cultural thinking. So I think we've got work to do on what those support mechanisms might be, and there's work to do on what those attitudes are. I think what comes across from all of you, though, is this has got to happen now. I mean, it's however hard things might be, this conversation's got to happen at this moment in time, because we could have a second wave, a third wave, a fourth wave, we don't know. But if the new reality is the end of culture, then we're screwed. So we need to work out something that allows us to be thinking beyond that. And to me, what you've all pointed to today is that publishing is at the heart of that. It's not a separate part, it's not a function, it's the heart of that whole mission to support and protect the films that we love. And I think you've given us some really big clues and some practical examples about how that can happen. So I'd like to say thanks to the panel, and thanks for yours coming for a film festival. We're out.